So today I'll be talking about the camera app on the smartphone, from the ones that I use to the ones that I don't use, and the ones that I hope which are included in the camera app. So the camera app varies from brand to brand, and within the brand itself it may vary from device to device depending on the camera lenses that you have on the smartphone. For my case, I'll be talking about the Oppo Find X2 Pro, which has three cameras at the back, which are the ultra-wide, wide, and the periscope lens. And at the front, you have a single selfie camera. I know that the Oppo Find X2 Pro is a little dated as it is a flagship phone from 2020. However, it is still running the latest ColorOS 13.1, so I believe what you have on a Oppo phone right now would be similar to what I have on my phone. So the default modes on the camera phone at the bottom are night, portrait, video, and photo. And there is also a more section where all the other modes can be found in there. There is also the option for you to customize the modes that you use more often or the modes that you don't use often. So it is good that you have that customization in most Android phones. I believe these modes are similar across most Android phones out there, whereas the iPhones are kept to the most simple and minimalistic way for most users. So starting with the photo mode, there is access across all lenses which I have on the phone, which are the main, ultra-wide, and periscope lens. The ultra-wide camera has autofocus, so it doubles up as a macro lens as well. So the settings that I go for is auto HDR and AI enhancement switch off. HDR helps to balance out the exposure between the subject and the background if there is a contrast difference between them, and it will help to stack multiple photos to have a more balanced exposure across both the subject and background. For me, I have that switch on because it is useful, especially in harsh condition. So for example, if I have a situation where the sky is very bright and I want to capture something of the subject, the contrast would be very different, and with HDR set to auto, the phone will automatically detect that there is a difference and it will bring up HDR to balance out the contrast. For AI enhancement, this helps to bring the extra pops and saturation for the photo that you have captured. And for me, I have that switch off because I do not like how it looks like, as it is somewhat different from what I see with my eyes. However, photography is very subjective, although there is so-called a standard, especially in professional photography, but it is something that you could choose whether to switch it on or off. There is also a Google Lens at the bottom of the camera app, and it is something that I would use pretty frequently, especially when it comes to ordering food or viewing the menu in a cafe or restaurant. Most of the cafes and restaurants are headed towards that direction these days, where they cut down on the menu and a need for an order taker. So everything is done through our mobile phone, and the Google Lens button at the bottom of the app is where I'll head to scan the QR code to either browse or order through the phone. So moving towards the zoom range at the middle bottom of the phone, there is where you could access the different camera from 0.6 to 0.9, which is the ultra-wide camera, from 1 to 4.9, which is the main camera, and 5 onwards is the periscope lens. At least that is the case for my phone. It may vary, depends on what you have at the rear of your smartphone. So most of the time, I would actually use the main camera to capture the photo, but if there is a situation where it cannot fit the framing, that is where I would switch to the ultra-wide camera. One thing I like about the Oppo Find X2 Pro is that the ultra-wide and the main camera color size is not too far off of a difference. So there is that consistency between the switch between the ultra-wide and the main camera. And speaking about the ultra-wide camera, as I mentioned earlier, it doubles up as a macro lens. So it is something fun and useful to have, with the exception of those 2 or 5 megapixel in some other smartphones. It is something fun that I use once in a while. For example, last year when I was at Strawberry Farm in Genting Highlands, there is a couple of flower photos that use macro photography to capture some of the most nice close-up photos of the flowers. Lastly, for the periscope lens, I do not really capture much photo with that, with the exception of capturing some of the moon photos whenever it's full moon and it's very bright. It is more of a fun shot rather than a serious shot, because at the end of the day, when I zoomed up to 60 times, that is a digital zoom, and the clarity of the moon is definitely not as great as compared to an actual camera itself. But I do use the periscope lens a lot, especially when I need to view things which are quite a distance away from me, especially looking at a train timing or a menu board if it's too far, especially when I do not have my glasses on, or even with my contact lens on, I could not see some things which are too far away, and apparently the phone allows it to see clearer than what I can see with my eyes. So that is very handy for me, and I do use it a lot, but not to capture photo. So overall, I like the versatility of these three cameras, which are the main, ultra wide or macro, and a periscope lens. But some flagship phones these days are moving away from periscope lens or even given a shorter zoom range, so that is a little unfortunate compared to back in the days. And next, with night mode, as the name suggests, it is for nighttime photography, and it is particularly useful especially in low light scenarios where it helps to brighten up the photos and capture more details in the photo. I'm thankful that even if I were to take a handheld photo in night mode, it does not capture blurry kind of photo as long as your hand is not shaking vigorously. And lastly, there is the portrait mode, which is one of the default modes in the camera app, and this is something that I do not use often as I'm not towards the artsy feeling of photos. Most of the photos which I've taken are like food photos, landscape photos, or something that I want the full clarity of both the background and foreground, so portrait mode certainly does not fit to my usage. It was something that I fancied a lot in the past, however, when portrait mode was first introduced last time. And last but not least, all the other modes which are kept in the More tab. There are modes such as panorama, time-lapse, and slow-mo, and I believe these are modes which are popular last time, and a lot of brands are actually marketing their phones with all these modes. Especially last time when there is no ultra-wide camera, as most phones are headed towards the main camera and portrait lens, and I think only LG is the one focusing on the main and the ultra-wide camera, but unfortunately LG Mobile has left the market, so RIP LG Mobile. Anyway, back to time-lapse and slow-mo, I feel that these are modes which are quite niche, as these are things which most people would not use them. It is more of like a for fun thing when it first come out, and I feel that these are modes which are tuned towards filmmakers. But even if for filmmakers, I believe they will use proper cameras instead of smartphone cameras. So as you can see, all these modes are kept in More, and I do not customize them to put it as one of the default modes because I do not use them. So on the flip side, which is the front camera, the two modes that I use often are similar to the rear camera, which are the main and night mode. There is also the additional feature for selfie, which is called Show Palm. As the name suggests, it is to show your palm, and this is useful for me because sometimes I want a wider field of view to take a selfie, and for me to stretch my hand and press the shutter button, it is a little like unnatural position for me. So with the show palm, it will automatically start a 3 seconds countdown timer, and I could comfortably stretch my hand to a correct position before it captures the photo. It also helps that I do not need to switch between setting the timer and then switching it back off at a later time in case I forgot to the next time round I were to take a selfie. And moving away from photography, for video I mainly use the video mode only. There are two other video modes in this phone which are film and dual view mode. And as for me, I'm not a vlogger or a filmmaker, so those two modes are things that I do not use. So the settings that I use for video for real is switching between 4K 60 and 1080p 30 or 60 depending on the things I shoot. And for this case, I'm using my Oppo Find X2 Pro to shoot this video in 4K 60. So to end it off, there are some of the things which I wish that are included on the phone are firstly a built-in QR code instead of a Google Lens button at the bottom left of the phone. This is more of an improvement of life things where I do not need to tap an additional button and then be redirected to another page just to scan a QR code. And the second thing I hope is to preserve the settings on the camera app. So one of the annoying things that I find in the selfie especially is the flash, which is set to auto by default. So whenever I'm in a dark environment or a low light environment, the flash would kick in where it will brighten up the front of the screen to the maximum brightness before capturing a photo. This is especially hurtful to the eyes and I do not find any comfort in it. And if I were to close the app and reopen it at a later time, the settings would not preserve it for the brightness to be switched off, and that is a little annoying, where I hope that there is a feature to preserve the settings in future. And thirdly, this may be a little stretch, but I hope that the zoom range will expand to beyond 10 times hybrid zoom to perhaps 20 times or 30 times if it is possible, because I know this is a mixture of hardware and software. Right now, most phones are capable of taking hybrid 10 times zoom, but I'm hoping that in future maybe it can go up to 20 or 30 to be on par with an actual zoom camera. I know the quality will not be similar, but at least move away from the 60 times digital zoom or 100 times space zoom, etc. to a proper hybrid zoom that is usable and good enough quality to share it on social media. So yeah, I've come to the end of the video, and if you do enjoy this video, do give it a like, do comment down if you have any opinions, and do subscribe for future videos like this. Thanks for watching.